Okay.
Okay.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Actually, I want to mention first off that Jay is not going to be able to join us. That's his dog in the corner there, of course. But he had some medical issues, and he actually is on his way over to the doctor right now to get those things checked out. So he may or may not be back in time to join us, but he wanted to have me let you know that. So it will be Lisa, Cheryl and I will be leading it this morning, and then we'll turn it over to Jay very quickly. First, what I'd like to do though, because Cheryl, okay, everybody notice where Cheryl is. She's not in her regular home that she's been in for the other meetings. Anybody want to guess what room she's in?
Mike should know, he's been here.
202?
Center.
Humanities.
I'm in 201 right now.
201,
no,
okay.
202.
So Cheryl, do you want to kind of explain what you're doing there and do an advertisement for it?
I will do that. So I'm in Humanities. Kevin is in Froyland and Dan is in Matson, if you read the email that came out yesterday. So if you have questions or if you have equipment to pick up your neck mics, we have most of those in the building where your office is. So go to the room that's labeled in that, or that's mentioned in that email, and the equipment should be there. We'll be back again in rooms this afternoon from 1 to 3, tomorrow morning from 9 to 10, and in the afternoon again from 1 to 3. So just stop in if you have questions. If you just want to try out the technology when there's somebody here who can answer questions, that's great. The one thing that I can tell you that we've had, the one little,
Oh, I think Shell froze.
cameras in the room, we have one camera. So the first red button needs to be pushed, that one needs to be selected, but you can't tell.
Cheryl, would you start back? Cheryl, would you start back? You froze right when you said the one little thing, and it froze. So if you could start
I'm not going to tell you that one little thing.
Tell us what that one little thing is. We'd appreciate it.
Let me go grab the
What do you think she said?
I'm going to grab the remote and show you. So just a second here. I walk across the room and grab it off the desk. Okay. So there's a remote in each room, and it looks like this. You'll want to make sure that before you start to move the camera, just push the one that says camera 1. Just give it one push. I wish they numbered those camera A, B, and C, but they didn't. So push 1, and then the presets are down here. So the thing that's happened is somehow camera 2 gets pushed, and then the presets won't work. So if the camera's not working, push that red button, try again. That's my tip for the day. But I will need to leave a little early today because we have media day. So they've invited the media in town to come and look at a couple classrooms in Froyland to see what we've done. So I have to pop out and be over there in case anybody shows up. But if you have questions that come up, stop in to the rooms when we're there, or just send me an email. I'm always looking at my email, so that's all I got today.
All right, great. Any other questions anybody want to? We're going to have time for questions at the end after Dee does his presentation and activity, but just kind of giving people an opportunity. I've got a chat. Let me check it down there. Okay. All right. So I think we're all right. So I think we're ready to go. I'm going to turn it over to Dee, and he's going to lead us through the rest of it.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. I'm gotten to where I'm looking forward to these Tuesday morning sessions. It really is fun to visit with you about my favorite subject of course design. it's humorous when I get done with these and I go, shut off my computer and go out to the house here. My wife says, you're floating through here, because I get to talk about course design with all these people that are listening to it and excited about it. They look like they're excited anyway. But it really is good to see you. I'm going to pull my screen up here. I've got some slides here I'm going to through, but we're working on part 3 of the 3-part series. So this is our last time together here. Let's see if we get that pulled up here. And what we've this today is the session for integration, where we're putting all the pieces together here. And here's one diagram. I'm going to explain a little bit about what we mean and then lay out our agenda, and then we'll get moving through it here. But this is where we showed the major components of good course design. And right at the middle of it, after we figure out what our learning goals and our activities, so forth, we want to work on the integration piece where we put it all together. Now, to put this in the flow chart here, you've had a chance to work on your 3-column table. And then we're going to take those activities, just the activities part, and put them into your weekly schedule with a lot of attention to what you put first, what you put second, what you put third. That is how you sequence them, so you get a dynamic sequence. And that's the agenda for today, taking those activities and put them in your weekly schedule or your segments of your course and so forth. Now, here's the 4 things we're going to talk about this morning and do some things with. We're going to work on identifying the main segments and topics, which was your homework assignment. Then we're going to take those activities and look at how to put them into the course in a dynamic sequence. Then I'm going to spend some time on 2 special activities or things you need to think about here. One of which is a thing I call the string of activities, and my acronym for it is learning how to learn. I'll unpack that all later. And then choosing a teaching strategy. If you can do these 4 things, you're going to do a good job of integrating the course and get this thing where it works right as a coherent whole. And that's the whole thing, is integrated course design. And this is where we really make that happen. So let's go to that, identifying the main segments and the topics for your course. Now, you had as your assignment, your homework assignment, the idea of taking your course and trying to identify a number of segments or blocks in it. I recommended somewhere between 4 and 7. But you lay these out literally, for me, in a piece of paper, but you want to save a little time, first class session, the first week, whatever, for getting started, connecting with the class, explaining to them how the class is going to operate, maybe doing some activities to get them familiar with some kind of teaching learning activities you're going to use that they might not be familiar with, like small groups or whatever. Also save a week or so at the end for your culminating project. You remember we talked about your big dream and the culminating project for the whole course. You want to have some time for that at the end, where you're not introducing new material, new content, but where you're asking them to take that and put together and do something significant and big with it, your culminating project. But in between getting started and culminating project, you want to have these blocks and segments here. So my question first is, this is going to be, help me out here with Sharon and anybody else here, or maybe just open up, unmute yourself. I want to find out, when you tried to identify the segments for your course, that first part of the homework, did you run into any questions or challenges? Was there anything, did anybody have difficulty doing that? Did it just look like, well, I have a whole bunch of things, 20 or 30 things, and I got to cover all these pieces, and I don't see any good way to block them? And maybe we can play with that as a whole group and see what we can do. But any questions or challenges just about that part of it, that's identifying the segments of your course? Maybe I should stop sharing and let me see your pictures again. Unmute yourself and speak up. This is a whole group thing. So questions, concerns, issues, anybody?
Well, one of the things that I can share a little something. One of the things that I have been thinking about is whether I want to group things that are completely related with each other all together, or whether I want to return to a topic and go into more depth throughout the semester. So I could either do a cursory kind of overlook of a bunch of things and then go into depth and how they relate to different things throughout the semester, or I could take the stuff that could be later in the semester and move it up to the beginning with the introductory stuff. Mm-hmm. And the way I've always done it in the past is sort of by layering it, going into more and more detail and more connections throughout the semester, but I could see an argument for doing it the other way too.
All right, what's the subject matter here? What's the course?
It's a microbiology course.
Microbiology, okay, okay. And one of the intro courses?
It's for biology majors.
Mike, okay. Anybody else here have some thoughts on that before I start thinking? I see I'm throwing out to you to get you to take part, so while I give me time to think about it a little bit. So I help me, but anybody have something that they feel similar to that and have had thoughts about it? To Paul's question here. Unmute yourself and share, please.
Yeah, I've thought about that a little bit as well. One of the challenges maybe in science a lot is that you use a textbook and the author's already determined the order of the topics. And so when you want to mix things up like Paul's suggesting, I found it straightforward, but I think there's like a messaging issue with the students. Sometimes they don't like it when you like bounce around different topics in the book. Right. And so you got to tell them, it's like, look, this is the big picture. And maybe this is one of the things we're going to get into. Maybe we're going to answer some sort of question. And in order to answer that question, we got to pop around the book a little bit.
Yeah. That's the way I typically do it. And it's not that they're not related, they're directly related. It's just that they need to be told how they're related.
Yeah. Because I think their default is just that
chapter 1 through chapter 30.
Exactly.
I agree,
Okay.
Alex and Paul. I think that
Science course. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just dealing with that in my data science course, and it seems weird, like, oh, we have to do statistics before we actually look at any data, so that when we have the data, we can actually do something with it. And so on the first day, I'm just going to explain to the students why we're basically doing it backwards, like why we're going to see, like, okay, how do we, get knowledge or insight out of this data before we actually look at and work with any data. So I think on that first day, I'm really going to take the opportunity to explain why we're doing it in the way that we're doing it, and sort of the overall big picture.
I like that last comment is very much in accord with what I talked about, getting started, explaining to your students how you're going to approach this course and how you're going to lay it out. And maybe, depending on what your final decision is, what your relationship with the course outline is to the outline in the textbook, which you may be following, you may be a little bit independent of that. One of the things that I found in my own teaching, but I also made some comments about this in that book, is the value of finding a big theme or a big question or even a diagram that lays out the big picture. And I like Paul's comment about that, laying out the big picture for the whole course or the subject matter of the course. And then as you're putting in pieces in that, and then you can keep coming back to that from time, okay, now here's the big picture, now we've just filled in this piece, now we can start building relationships to this piece over here, and we can fill in that piece, and they can see how we're building something as we go along. And if to the degree that you can do that, I think that helps students a lot and makes the course more dynamic. Let's see what else. Oh, well, the other thing was Carrie, right? Was just talking about introducing concepts, and then how much of that you introduce before you have students start doing something with them, maybe some data, maybe some problems or whatever. My general experience is don't wait too long after you've introduced some concepts before you have them do something with it. In other words, I wouldn't recommend spending 6 weeks introducing concepts and then 7 weeks of doing something with it. I would do 2-1, 2-1, 2-1 or something like that, or even on Monday and Wednesday, we introduce concepts, and Wednesday, Friday, we do something with them. I mean, the sooner you can get them to doing something with it, the more they're going to really understand it, and the more it's going to go into the long-term memory. Hearing about it, reading about it is a good start, but it's when they do something with it, it starts to connect to the long-term memory. So I recommend breaking it up a little bit in that sense to the degree that you can. Okay, thank you folks for chiming in on that. I want to also then ask about I'm going to go back, bring my screen back up here. Where are we? I'm gonna have to do this every time here. Don't like that. The other thing we asked some people if they could do is when you looked at the labels for your segments of your course, to see if you could find a way to convert the labels from nouns to questions. Did anybody have a chance to do that? And if so, what sort of, give us some examples of what you did. Anybody able to create questions for the segments of your course?
Hi, I'm Pilar here.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And yes,
Tell us the course.
this is a course that is a writing component for upper level Spanish.
Okay.
And we're focusing on film. So we're watching films and discussing films and writing about them.
Okay.
And I have 3 segments. The first segment tries to focus on ourselves as writers and spectators of films. The second one focuses on the work by critics and by scholars. And the third one focuses on the community and what we learn about Hispanics through film. So the questions for my first segment are, what does move us and what does, I'm translating, I'm sorry, yes, I'm reading, so I'll slow down here. What moves us and what sort of inspire us to do both activities? And where are we now and what are we looking to develop as writers and spectators?
And second segment?
And for the second segment, I have, that's the academics and scholars. And the question is, how do we define a point of view? And what do we value in a dialogue?
Oh, nice. Okay. And the third one?
And the third one is community. And the questions I have are, what topics and tendencies can we identify so far in the films we've watched? And what do these works teach us about the Hispanic world?
And what do these tell us about the Spanish world? Wow. See, now I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, I'm dying to take that course. I want to know the answer to those things, and that's just what it can do when you can use your imagination and create some questions like that. That really sounds interesting. As opposed, I mean, the other is very descriptive, and I used to always, very prosaic. Well, this bit's about ourselves. This one's about the critics. This is about the community. Nice, but when you lay out those kind of questions, and I not only want to know the answers, I want to know, how would I answer that? I mean, how would I figure out an answer to those questions? And if you can get your students involved in working up their own answers and sharing those with them, and then deepening their answers to that via dialogue and so forth, that would be exciting. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. Wonderful. Anybody else? Anybody else? Let's get one more example, if we can, of anybody who was able to create some questions for their course, for the segments. Anybody? It's a good chance to try it out. Run it up the flagpole. Get some feedback.
I can go.
Yep.
Yay, okay.
Okay, so I actually have not been working on my FYS for this CDF, but I brought my FYS in for this assignment because I was having a little trouble with the segments at the end. They're really, so my FYS is on robot love, and it's how mythology, how Greek and Roman mythology come up in film. It's also a film course like Pilar's, except it's for freshmen. And it's about how mythology comes up in the stories about technology. So I start with the stories, actually, the myths that we read. What stories do we tell, in parentheses, about technology? What stories do we tell in general, but then what stories come up over and over again with films about technology? My second segment became what makes us human.
It's about what?
What makes us human.
Oh, okay.
Because the technology is sort of a way that we define ourselves. And so, and then our final question, then my third question was, what is our relationship to technology?
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I have right now.
Well, that's okay. Yeah. That well, and you may have more as that develops. But now, what was your first question? You said it was about technology, but how did you frame the question?
What are the stories that we tell?
What are the stories about technology?
But that question comes up in the whole course, and so does every question. So that's kind of been my problem, is every question comes up all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, here's a first thought, just without knowing anything about your subject and so forth. But you might say for that first one, what are the different kinds of stories or different kinds of narratives that Greeks and Romans told about technology? And so you might, you know, I don't know if there are different stories or different kinds of stories or narratives that they put in, but that flags people. There's not just one story out there. There might be a number of them, and it might be useful to know the similarities and differences and so forth, but compare and contrast between those different narratives of them. But then I think you could spend some time just on that. But you're right. It'd be one kind of narrative says one thing about what it means to be human, and a different narrative has different implications about the human and about the relationship. But what you want to do is find something that whatever they're working on in weeks 2, 3, and 4 is not the same thing they're working on in weeks 7, 8, and 9, or 12, 13, 14. Yeah, that is, you want something new coming on in the second part of the course and third part of the course, or however many parts you have it divided up into. And you want that sense of moving forward or building or whatever. So you have to think about, what are we going to do differently in that middle segment and the final segment or whatever. I don't know if that helps or not, but you want to think about what are we going to be doing there that we aren't doing part 1, other than reading a different author. Okay.
Right, and that was the difficulty I was having. The films get increasingly sophisticated, so we start with some pretty straightforward films, and by the time we're watching films that just pack a lot in. And so I feel like I could tease out also more specific. I mean, the questions are already super complicated, but a little bit more specific.
They're all related, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else here work in the humanities that might want to chip in here on how to help her solve this? We've got 3 distinct questions, but how do we not just deal with all 3 of them for 15 weeks?
I mean, I guess I don't really necessarily see that as a bad thing.
Okay, go ahead. Say more.
Well, I mean, I think it's good to revisit the questions you thought you answered, and you might change your answer or have new textures to your answers and the new things, the new narratives you're exploring. I mean, I think that would be really compelling to be able to kind of, I mean, and maybe that's not how it will work out. And so, I mean, you're going to be the best at figuring out if it is a problem, but I could see room for it to be like, yeah, this is the question that we'll be dealing with. And you might think at the beginning that you have the answer, but then only realize that it's actually a little bit more complicated than you ever imagined. That could be a good thing, I suppose, right?
Yeah, well, I can see that makes sense to me. But what then would keep you? What would be different about that discussion in the third of middle of the course and at the end of the course? Is it that we are moving to a different author, a different set of authors, different times, different places, different parts of society, or something like that, that would then give different answers to those questions? I mean, I'm asking Michael here. Is that what you would imagine? Because what you say makes sense of go ahead and deal with all 3 questions as a block here. But maybe with one kind of authors or one kind of narrative, and then move to another kind, and then you get different answers and say, well, these make sense too, or whatever. Well, what would give it a sense of moving?
No, I think that makes sense. That it's, I mean, that so you're dealing with the same questions, but it's the circumstances that have changed that make you re-examine it. And I suppose then that becomes the focus. It's not maybe the end then is more an examination of the questions and how we formulate them themselves. That is something that's worthwhile too.
And you, toward the end of it, you can start to be more reflective. How is it we arrive at different answers, or how they arrive at different answers, and so forth, whatever you want to do with that. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you both, Rocky and Michael, for helping us play with that. But these two examples will give us some sense of the, to me, the value of using questions as labels, but thinking carefully about using those in your course, and the way you lay it out to students, and let that sort of guide your movement through the course here. Okay, so so let's say that we've got some segments identified, and let's see now. Get back. I'm like, oh, here we go. I don't have right here. All right, now let's go on to the second part and explore this a little bit. If we get our segments identified, how do we put the activities from the 3-column table into that weekly schedule or sequence here, but in a dynamic way? And we've started exploring that. But that's basically going back to what we did in the 3-column table, and take all these activities from the right-hand 2 columns and putting them in that weekly schedule someplace. Now I'm going to show you a diagram that will maybe help you do this a little bit. We'll see how that works for you, but here's the way I've thought of it. This is what we're trying to do, is as the semester progresses, you've heard me intimate this, and this is what I was getting at here, that you start out the semester having them engage in one set of learning activities that has value in itself, but also gets them ready to do something a little more challenging, a little different perspective, like we did in the humanities course here. And that gets them ready for a third set of activities, and that gets them ready for that culminating project. And what we want is not just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, just another discrete thing, but we want these things to build on each other, so that when you get to the second set of activities, you know you're in a new, not a higher, but a more challenging, different set of activities. You're learning something new and different than what you did in the first set. In the third set, you're learning something new and different, and that builds on and incorporates, but adds something to what you did in the first and the second, and so forth. So here's one way of doing that. Here's a little format. This is kind of like a template of activities. And in the left-hand column, I just laid out the weeks in 4 segments here. You can have 3 segments or 4 or 5 or whatever. But then the next 2 columns are sort of related closely to each other more than the 3rd column here. What you do in that, what I call the foundational knowledge, one part of it is you have topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. That's where you, in the science courses, you go chapter 1, chapter 2, or whatever. In the humanities course, you might go a set of authors, another set of authors, another set of authors, or whatever. But you're trying to introduce some of the knowledge. Mainly we're focusing on foundational knowledge. You do some readings, maybe have some lectures or whatever. Read before class, test during class, or whatever. But along with that, you want to spend some careful thought. So all those activities related to foundational knowledge, that's where they go in that left-hand column. But when you move to the middle column, that's where you're in having students do things more. So here you're going to be drawing from those activities you had in the application, the integration, the human dimension, interacting with others, and so forth, okay? And what you want to do with this one is do that backward design, starting with the end in mind. So when you plan it, you go to the very end of the course and work from there back to the beginning. And here's what that looks like, kind of reverse of the diagram I showed you a moment ago. You put in your culminating project at the tail end of the course. Then you say, to do a good job on that culminating project, what would they need to be doing just before that? And that gets you what a set of activities to be doing in that 3rd element of the course here. And if I want them to do that in that 3rd element in step C, what do they need to be doing just before that? And that's step B, and back to the beginning with step A. So you plan it from the end of the course back toward the beginning. Now, when you implement it, of course, you go the other way. You start the beginning and move towards that culminating project. And that's going to be a lot of that you want to do in class, maybe some practice outside of class, but you want to give students opportunities to do these doing things, especially the application and integration inside class, where you and the other students can give each other feedback on how they're doing. That's the value of doing as much of this in, when you have them do homework outside of class, that's fine. But if they do it wrong, there's a long delay between doing it and getting feedback if it's not doing it quite properly. And so you want to do these things in class as much as you can. Now, the 4th column over here, I'm calling it parallel independent activities. There are things that are going on. They're part of the in-class activities in many ways, but they're not connected closely to topic A, B, and C. The topic is part of this whole thing. And this is where you do things that are related to the caring things you do to help them get excited about the course, the human dimension itself, the learning how to learn, and so forth. So this might be writing little minute papers, learning journals, learning portfolios, string of activities, where you have them do things out of class, you see at the bottom, and then maybe come in and share some of that in class. I share in or outside of the class. If you're in an online course, they can share that electronically outside of class there. But if you're dealing with a face-to-face, you can have them do it inside the class in their small groups maybe, and there's a lot of value in that. Now, let me pause. Any quick questions about what we're talking about? The next thing I'm gonna do is show you a little bit about that string of activities. I think it has some special significance, but before we get into that, just any quick questions about, this is a template for taking those activities from the 3-column table and figuring out how you put them into a good sequence in your class so that they build on each other and make it dynamic. Anybody? Now I'm going to share these PowerPoint slides with you all, so you don't have to copy those all down, but any questions about them? No? Okay. Well, we can move on here then. Okay, well, let's take a look at that string of activities. I talked to you earlier about this learning how to learn segment of the taxonomy. And that has a couple different meanings. One is just learn how to be an effective student during their college career in their courses and so forth. But another part of that learning how to learn is preparing students to be effective, self-directed learners about this subject matter after the course is over, after college, perhaps throughout their lives. Now, that's a lofty goal, but I think it's one we would all be excited about if we thought there was some way we could really promote that. That is helping students be self-directed learners, okay? Well, during my last part of my teaching career at Oklahoma, I came upon this activity that it was in a course that I taught for graduate students on preparing for college level teaching. And that was a really important part of this course because I knew this was the one course they were going to have that was getting them ready for college level teaching. These were engineers. And I knew I couldn't teach them everything they were ever going to need to know about college teaching. So my strategy for that was to identify a handful of what I called the fundamentals of good teaching. But I also really wanted to put a lot of emphasis on gearing them up to learn more about college teaching after the course was over. And this is what I did. Let's get this is in that 4th column and had I'm calling it a string of activities. So there's some things I did early in the course and then built on that later and built on that later. And finally it ended up with a culminating report just about learning how to learn, okay? And you did that part there. So here's a more specific week by week kind of version of what we did in that. And I'm spending some time with this because I think the general idea has applicability to almost any course, undergraduate or graduate. If it's something we want them to keep on to continue learning about after the course is over, after college is over. So here we are. So the culminating project in this case was I wanted them to create a learning portfolio. That was one of the major assignments in the course. But one part of that learning portfolio, the final part, was I wanted them to create a plan for their near future learning about college teaching. Now, what I meant for near future was the next 1 or 2 years after they finished college and started teaching. Now, most of these people were taking this course during their either their last or next to last year of graduate school. So they were going to be teaching, accepting an academic position very soon after this course was over. So that's what I meant by near future. Okay, and I wanted them to have a plan. A plan means if they have a plan, they've got 2 things. They need to have a learning agenda. They need to identify some things that they want to learn about after the course is over. And they've got to have a learning strategy. That is a clear a plan in mind of specifically what am I going to do to learn about that topic. And what we did during the semester was build up to that plan step by step. So here's what we did. In week 3 of the course, I gave everybody an assignment. This is a class that met once a week. I think it was a Wednesday afternoon or something like that, or Wednesday evening. And so at the end of the week, at the end of the class in week 3, I gave them an assignment. I said, I want you to go out and find resources on college level teaching and learning, not topics, resources. So we're looking for bibliographies. We're looking for websites that have resources on them. We're looking for a list of readings from books on college teaching, things like that. So I want everybody to find, this is an individual assignment, everybody find 5 resources on college teaching and bring them back to class 2 weeks from now. So they had 2 weeks to do this. So 2 weeks from then, they came back, they shared their resources with each other in small groups, and they learned from, whoa, where'd you find that? How'd you find that sort of thing? So they learned how to find resources as well as sharing their own resources. So then they gave me a piece of, well, electronically now, they'd email me their list of resources. I gave it to a departmental secretary and said, put these into a master list and then email that back to them. So now they had a big list of several resources on college teaching. So then 2 weeks later, I said, now I want you to take that list of resources you have, and I want each of you to go in and look at those resources and find 10 major topics on college level teaching that go beyond what we're going to study in this course. You have the syllabus, we're going to study these 5 major topics. Question, beyond these 5 topics that we're going to deal with in the course, what else is out there that might be valuable to learn about teaching? So identify some things that you would see as just important, potentially important for you as beginning college teachers. Make that list, bring it back to class 2 weeks from now. So, 2 weeks from then, week 7, I said, okay, get in your groups, share your topics, see what everybody else found, turn them into me. I gave the secretary, made up a master list of topics. So now we got a pretty large list of topics. There were about, I guess, about 15 to 20 people in that course. So we had a pretty good sized list of topics in there. Some of them found the same topics. That's all right. We can eliminate those. But now they had a large list of topics on college teaching beyond what we're going to look at in this course. So then 2 weeks from now, I said, okay, now you've got that list of topics. Now what I want you to do is individualize that. I want you to look at that list and identify 4 topics that you consider the most urgent for you to learn about in the next 1 to 3 years. And I want you to just write up a 1-paragraph statement about it. Tell me what I want you to turn that paper in, but what are the 4 topics? And then just a paragraph on each one. Why did you select that topic as something that was really important for you to learn about in the next 1 to 3 years? Why would that be valuable for you to learn about that? So again, they came back into class at the week 8 and shared that with each other, or week 9 I guess it was, and shared that with each other and found out why everybody thought different topics, what the reasoning was of identifying urgent topics. And they turned that into me, and I gave it, passed it around to others, but they kind of had that. Then we took a different turn. Now we're at week 9, just a little past halfway in the course. And I said, now you've identified 4 topics that you consider urgent. What I want you to do now is pick 1 out of those 4 topics and learn about it right now on your own, outside of class, without my help as a teacher. But I'm going to give you 4 weeks to do that, not just 2 weeks, but 4 weeks, because you need a little time to do that. Now, there are only so many things that a person can do to learn about a topic in 4 weeks, especially if you're a grad student. I mean, you can read a couple of books. You can, if you know some professor who's doing something and knows about something kind of teaching, go talk to them and watch their class, see what they're doing, see how it works. You might find a video or 2 online, something like that. If you happen to be a TA, you might try doing something and seeing how it works and see, learn about it that way, actually doing something with it. But whatever it is, I want you to take 4 weeks to learn about a topic. And when you come in back 4 weeks from now, I want you to be prepared to share with the class and write up a little essay for me. Which topic did you pick? What did you do to learn about it? And what did you learn about it? What's it all about? What do you have to do to make it right? How do you evaluate it and so forth? How do you make it work right? So forth, so forth. So they did that. 4 weeks from then, they came back and shared that with each other. And then I put on, I'll put on my little preacher hat and I said, now I want to make sure y'all know what you just learned. You just learned that you're capable of learning more about college teaching on your own without a course, without a teacher. How do you know you can do that? Because you just did it, okay? So what I was trying to do was give them some confidence that they in fact had engaged in and learned how to do it, a preliminary step, independent learning, self-directed learning. But when they shared that with each other, they also learned from each other how other people tried to learn something in a 4-week period. So they learned about how to learn about a topic in a condensed format of time. Okay, so now we're up to week 13. We're getting near the end of the semester. I said, okay, you identified 4 topics as important for you to learn about. You've learned about one of them already. What I want you to do now is take the other 3 topics that were on that list, and I want you to lay out a learning strategy for each one of those. That is, what could you do to learn about each of those 3 topics if you had 1 to 3 years, not 4 weeks, but more time. So now that opens up the door to, you know, reading several books, combination of things, talking to people, maybe going to a conference on that topic, trying it out, maybe visiting somebody who's done something with it or whatever. But for each of those 3 topics, write a little, you know, short statement about what you would do to learn, what you could do to learn about that if you had more time. Bring that back to class. Well, when they did that, you know, a week later, they had identified topics, they had identified learning strategies for each topic. What that gave them was a plan for their own future professional development after they finished this course. What they did then was put that in as part 4 of that learning portfolio, which was the culminating project for the course. Okay. That was a learning how to learn. I call that my string of activities. And I thought it really did a great job. When they got done, I thought they both knew how to identify important topics and develop a learning strategy for it on their own, because they had walked through it step by step. They had seen how other people did it and they learned from each other. And I felt fairly clearly, I haven't had a lot of feedback from them. I did have 1 or 2 cases where they talked to me, but I think because they created it, because they gained some confidence and ability to learn on their own, there was a high likelihood that they actually would engage in learning about some of those topics that they identified for themselves, and then would be able to go on from there because they learned how to do it and they gained some confidence and they saw the value of it. They could plug it into their teaching. So that's what I called my string of activities there. Any questions about that? Anybody? And I'm going to send you, I'm sending Lisa and Jay about a 2-page write-up about this, so you'll have more even than what's available here if you want to, if this intrigues you. But I really think if you want to help students learn, walking them through the process like this and having them actually learn about something would help them develop the ability and the confidence to do this on their own after the course over. So I really think it could work in almost any course. There might be some exceptions, but I think it'd work in most of them. Any questions? Now's the time.
Are there best practices as it would relate to building this kind of scaffolding for an assignment like that you've seen in the past? Does that exist in the literature? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, no, this is just something I created on my own. I didn't find it out there. I just this was something I really wanted them to do, was learn how to learn. And I finally asked myself, how could I do that in a really thorough way? And so I came up with this. And so I don't know if I have a good answer to your question, because I haven't seen 20 other people do it and then give me feedback from different kind of disciplines or graduate courses versus undergraduate or anything like that. I just believe that it would work pretty much anywhere, but it'll just take people trying it to see if that's really true. I mean, presumably it'd have to be adapted, because these were grad students, they were motivated, they were sharp. So I mean, everybody really did develop a good plan. I mean, they did it, they engaged in it earnestly, and as a result, it really worked well, and I felt they saw the value of it. Well, I have to tell you one story. This isn't just about this, but with that course, but I think this was part of it. There was a guy in that course, had 2 semesters of it, and he went out and got a job right out in California. And he emailed me about 2 years later, I think it took him 2 years. He won the university's teaching award for that year, and he credited a lot of it to that course. I mean, part of it was what he learned, but part of it, I was also modeling everything I had learned about from good. I was using good course design. I was using small groups with the form of team-based learning and things, and they saw that stuff and they saw the impact of that on them and their motivation. And in fact, one student about, I guess it was about week 4 or 5 in the course, we were just getting started, and he said, Dr. Fink, I got a question for you. I said, what's that? Why isn't this course required if all graduate students are going on to teaching it? I said, well, the short answer is there is no good reason. You're right, it ought to be. And I said, the bigger answer is departments haven't yet seen the value of requiring this for the student or having somebody ready to teach it well. But they really did see the value of it, but especially I think this exercise. They did, I think they did get on a learning curve and saw the value of it. So I can't really give a good answer to that, but I just developed it and haven't had a lot of feedback from others. But thanks for asking. Any others?
Thanks for sharing.
Anything else here? Okay, well, we'll go on here. Now, one other thing that I think is really important when you're laying out these activities in your course is to give a lot of thought to what teaching strategy you use. I'm using the word carefully, teaching strategy. And let me share you what I'm doing here. I'm distinguishing between a teaching strategy and a teaching technique. Now, this is not everybody's language, this is just my language, but what I mean by a teaching technique is a specific kind of teaching learning activity. I give a lecture, that's a technique. I lead a whole class discussion, technique. I set up a think, pair, share, that's a technique, okay? And you want to have good techniques and you want to use them effectively and so forth, and that's important. But I think more important than that is your choice of a teaching strategy. Now, what do I mean by a teaching strategy as compared to a teaching technique? What I'm talking with a teaching strategy is a particular combination of learning activities. So it's not a single activity, but a set of learning activities arranged in a particular sequence. It matters what activities you put together, and it matters what you put first, what you put second, what you put third. One good way of figuring out what your actual teaching strategy is, or what teaching strategy you want to use, is this little diagram that I call the castle top, kind of like the top of it looks like the top of a castle, okay? But and I'm just laying that with a hypothetical Monday, Wednesday, Friday class here. But whatever activities you have students do in class, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, are the boxes above it. And whatever you have them do out of class, between classes, is what goes in the boxes below the line. Everybody has some activities they have them do in class and out of class. Well, whatever your activities are, that is your teaching strategy. So everybody has one. Now, my argument, though, is that not all teaching strategies are equally good or equally powerful. Some are clearly more impactful than others, okay? Now, you can either take some teaching strategies off the shelf and use them, and people do, and I do, or you can create your own, and I do a little bit of that. But the two biggest ones that I'm familiar with that you can take off the shelf are things called problem-based learning and team-based learning. Some of you may have heard of that. Some of you may be using some of those. Both of them are examples of they use small groups in powerful ways. So they use that combination of in-class, whole class activities, small group activities. What's different between them is the sequence. Problem-based learning starts with the big problem at the very first beginning of the course. Here's a big problem. I want you to learn in small groups how to figure out how to answer that question. And they give a big thing. I remember one I saw one time was whether or not to put some additive in breakfast cereal. I think phthalic acid or whatever it was, some additive. And in the general, that's good for people, but some has some hazards for some people. So the question is, how much can you put in, and at what level would it be safe for general population or for pregnant women or whatever, okay, or people with diabetes or something like that. So students have to take time to figure out, well, what do we need to know to answer that question or solve that problem or respond to that challenge, and then learn it and see if that solves it, and if not, learn some more and solve it until the goal by the end of the course is having a good answer to that problem. Team-based learning reverses that. The big problem comes at the end of the course. But what you do is do little application problems in segments kind of building up to something like that. I'll give you one example of a colleague of mine. Well, he's the guy who came up with team-based learning. It turns out he was from Oklahoma, but he's in the business college. And he had a course one time where on organizational behavior. And one of the part of the course was about organizational structure, one about communication within it, one was about promoting a certain culture, and I forget what all the other pieces were. But you worked on those one at a time and kind of learned how to use those concepts to build good organizations. The final project was he had the students look at a film called, what was that film many years ago about corruption in the New York Police Department? Anybody remember that? I'm forgetting the name of it right now. It was a powerful, popular movie. But anyway, he had him watch that. New York Police Department is very corrupt, and that has bad consequences for the city, the policemen, the community, and so forth. Challenge for all these people. You've learned about organizational behavior. You've been called to be part of a committee by the New York mayor. He wants you to solve the problem of cleaning up the corruption in the New York City Police Department. Question: how would you do that? Okay, so you have to use your understanding of organizational structure, communication, culture, okay? But that came at the end, but you work on parts of that building up to it. So that's what I mean, that's a combination of activities in a particular sequence. Now, let's go on, and I'm going to give you one other thing why I think thinking about your teaching strategy and using that castle top diagram is valuable. Then I'm going to give you a problem to work on. One of the values of that castle top diagram is it enables you to start to see how you can connect session A to session B in a dynamic way and session B to session C and so forth. And the way to do that is to kind of put a circle around the last half or third or whatever of session A, connect it to the out of class activity, and connect that to the beginning part of session B. So what you would do is in the last third or whatever of session A, you would introduce the next topic to be studied in session B, okay? And then they'd go into their out of class, maybe do some readings, maybe do some initial application activity, practice some exercises, may go do an outside of class empirical study of something or other, but do some out of class activities that would take what you started learning about in that introduction at the end of session A and start doing something with it, learning something about it. Then when you come back to class in session B, in the first half of it, 2/3 of whatever, you do a larger application activity and debrief what you learned about the topic. So you got a part 1 in session A, a part 2 in out of class, and a part 3 in session B. And then you just repeat that sequence for the connections between the different. And what that does is doesn't put all the focus on session A, session B, but the connections between in class, out of class, in class, out of class in a more integrated, connected way. But now what I want to do now is allow you to compare two different teaching strategies. I made the big claim a while ago that not all teaching strategies are equal and some are clearly better than others. I'm going to give you a chance to test that proposition out. I'm going to show you the sequence of activities in two different classes with two different teaching strategies and ask you to answer the same question about each of them. So here's the first one, a very traditional class. In class, we have lecture, lecture, lecture for some period of time and then an exam. Out of class, you do the usual saying, do some readings, do some homework, maybe review it for the exam and so forth. So you set that kind of a teaching strategy up. And here's the question. If the teacher uses that teaching strategy, which of the following 4 items will have the highest likelihood of happening? That is, what can you be most certain will happen? They may all happen, may not have happened. What has the highest likelihood that you can be sure that will happen? 1, 2, 3, or 4. I'm going to give you 2 seconds to think that out. That shouldn't take long. Anybody blurt it out. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Anybody? I see a 1. Okay. Anybody else? I can't see them all. Lisa, can you see some of the others or not? Let's see. Hold up a finger. 1, 2, 3, or 4. I see some 1s. I see a 2. Ah, okay, good. I see several 1s. Okay. Well, I'll give you my thing without the next one. I want to come back and I'm going to give you a different strategy. It's going to take more time, but I agree with the 1s on that one. Yep, there we go. They may understand the content, they may be able to use it, but the only thing you can be sure about, assuming they've attended class, is that they have been exposed to it, because that's the part you were in control of, okay? So I would agree with the ones on that one. The others may happen, but you don't know very well. Now let me show you different come on. Now what am I doing here? How come that's not forwarding? Okay, now, but yeah, there we go. Now, very different teaching strategy. The first thing that happens, in fact, happens outside of class. You have them read the text for the whole week or 2 weeks, okay? So that they have to start not the night before, but the week before. No lecture. They come back to class after reading that. The first class session on this topic, they get a test on the readings, but they in a new and unusual way. First, they take a test, like just a basic multiple choice test on did they understand the basic ideas in the reading assignment. They take that test individually, and then without getting any feedback on it yet, they get together in groups that the teacher sets up and takes the same test, this time as a group. So they have to reach consensus answers. So there's a lot of talking. Well, who answered A, who answered B, who answered C? Well, you answered A, how come? But you answered B, why'd you do that? And they have to, well, I thought I remembered something from the readings that said to that, or I think this is what the question's really asking, or this is the way I would interpret the question, or so forth. But they have to reach a consensus answer. By the end of that time, then eventually they find out what the correct answers are. But what that process does is kind of raises them quickly to not a mastery, but a reasonably good understanding of the content of this segment of the course. Then they maybe do some homework, but and I show it next, what happens next, and I show it as one box, but it's really 2 or 3 or 4 boxes. They spend a lot of time in class, in groups, not individually, but in small groups, working on increasingly challenging application problems. Okay, so they're taking the knowledge they gained from the reading and then making sure they understood it properly in that test, but then they practice doing something with it, using it to answer questions, solve problems, or whatever the doing part of the course is. Then finally, the teacher says, I think you've got the hang of this, review what you've learned, and then we're going to have either an individual exam or a small group culminating project where you're going to have to show you understand the content, but also you know how to use it in some way. And that's the application part of it. Okay, so now no lectures whatsoever, okay? There's going to be teacher talk and some maybe mini lessons, but by and large, it's reading outside of class, making sure you understand it, then a whole series of application problems, then a checking on the ability to understand and do something with it. If you do that, same question. Now, this is going to be a little more challenging. Which of those 4 has the greatest likelihood of happening if you use this teaching strategy? I'm going to give you some time to think about that. You can unmute yourself and talk if you want to and speak out, ask questions, share your thoughts. Why don't we do that? When you're ready, when you have a thought, why don't you just unmute yourself and speak out, and that'll allow the rest of us to see who you are and what your answer is. And we'll probably have some different answers on this one. Usually we do. I do that.
I have some thoughts based on teaching a creative writing workshop of some sort, whether it's a fiction workshop or a nonfiction workshop. When students get to the workshopping part where they're workshopping their peers' work, they often say, well, I'm here as a student. I don't know how to work this person's work because I'm learning how to do this myself. And so I like that there's a lot of opportunities for them to interact with the content and be exposed to it and be able to talk about it. But I don't know if they're going to feel that they actually have the full confidence of understanding the content, or if they're going to feel fully empowered to use the content if there is some guidance from the instructor who says, yes, you're doing this right, or whatever. So
well, that's a valid concern, but here's how that gets addressed with this particular teaching strategy. The first thing that happens is in those the reading the text and that readiness assurance test, they're not critiquing any of the other students' work, okay? They're just doing the usual student work of reading something and trying to understand it, and the test is trying to measure and give them feedback and help them, give them feedback on understanding, and where they don't understand it properly, use, well, the other student got this answer, and then when they talk about, well, I think that's a better answer. Then at some point during that session, this teacher tells them what his answers to those questions are and why that's the right answer, so forth. But then when you get into the application problem, which in your case would be writing and then sharing feedback, I think you would do what I'm guessing you probably do anyway. Well, yeah, at the start of this class, you don't have a lot of capability to give feedback to others. But one of the things we're going to do in this class is gradually to develop our understanding of what constitutes good writing. And as you develop that understanding, you're going to be able to give better and better feedback to your peers, but also you're going to be able, as the result of that, look at your own writing and see where, oh, I could make that better, I could make that better. So the whole course, the whole segment, the whole course becomes a let's get better at learning what constitutes good writing and how to create it and how to see when it's there and when it's not there, and if it's not there, how to change it. So that would be built into that. But so thank you for raising that question. Yeah. Other thoughts about the this sequence, but also about which one of these answers you think is most likely to happen? Just unmute yourself and speak up. Anybody? Somebody give me a shot here. What's your best shot? This is more challenging than the other one.
As I think about it, obviously they're going to be exposed. They have a better chance of understanding, and using supports the understanding and vice versa. But something that you use for a while, it becomes valuable to you because it's a window on how you look at the world.
Right.
So I think in the best possible scenario, you get all four.
Well, let me take your comments because your comment is my comment, but I pressed you to pick one, okay? And if I had to pick one out of that set, I would pick number 3, primarily because you spend so much time. I said there were 3 or 4 of those boxes where you're practicing application. If I had to pick one, I would say this one really does an outstanding job of helping students learn how to use the content. But you're exactly right, because my full answer to that is, as you use it, you improve your understanding. And as you see the kind of questions this content can answer or the kind of problems it can solve, you see the value of the content. So in essence, you really get all of it. But the real part is 2, 3, and 4, of course. Being exposed to it is a means to an end, but the real learning goals are 2, 3, and 4. And that's why I think this is such a better teaching strategy than this one up here, okay? Because this one, you're really only sure about one, maybe the others, maybe yes, maybe not. But here, you really do get 2, 3, and 4. Now, this particular, just for those of you who are wondering about it, this is a classic example of the team-based learning I was talking about earlier, okay? Where you create teams and they work toward an application project. Now, I'm not showing you this to say you all ought to be using team-based learning. I like it, I do use it. But what I am using it to say is it really does make a difference what your teaching strategy is. That's what's going to make your course powerful or mediocre. You've got to have a good teaching strategy. So let me hold that at that because we're right at the end of the hour, but I think we're just about at the time. So these are the 4 things we've worked on today. We've spent some time learning about how to identify the main topics and think a couple people, we saw how to put some questions on some of those labels. How to put the activities into the course with that one template. I spent some time showing you how to that string of activities, learning how to learn, help students learn how to learn and gain the confidence and plan for the future. And finally, how to choose a teaching strategy. If you can do those 4 things, you're going to be able to have a good, you're going to be able to do a good job of integrating the course and do this final segment of it, where you take those activities and put them into a sequence. And if you can do that right, the impact of that's going to be you're going to be able to take that and all that learning you imagined at the beginning, that exciting big dream and culminating project, will be the learning achieved in the course because you've got the right activities in it. And that's a 3-column table. And you've put those activities together in a good sequence with a good teaching strategy, etc. You do all of that and you will see the students engaging in the course and achieving lots of high quality learning in all the different aspects of that taxonomy, in a way that I would predict most of you have not seen to that level before. And that's basically the promise of good course design. You design it right, you're going to see better results. But that involves a lot of different things like we've talked through in these last 3 sessions. So I'm going to wrap it up here and say any final questions or comments about all of this? don't want to cut in too much to the things that they want to talk about at the end of the course here. But so maybe I'll just go ahead and wrap it up and say, I want to thank you very much. I have really enjoyed these 3 sessions we've had together. My wife says whenever you get Fink a chance to talk about course design, he gets excited. She hears my voice and away we go. And that's really true, but it's been fun working with you. And I think the students here at Augustana University are going to be really in for a treat when they start sitting in on some of your courses, when you try to use some of these ideas. I think you're going to get them excited, and when they get excited, you're going to get excited about what you see happening there. So thank you very much for the time we've had together. And if any of you do have questions later on about some of this course design stuff, you want to contact me, let me go ahead and give you my email. I am certainly open to trying to work with people on a one-on-one thing for a problem here or there. I am retired. I've got things I'm doing in my life, but I definitely enjoy working with people, professors like you all, on your course design process. So that's it. I'm going to wrap it up and just say thank you very much. I really have enjoyed this. I hope you have too.
Thank you so much, Dee. This has been wonderful. So I'll let you, we'll go back to full screen. And yeah, wow. I've been taking notes here on my Google document. And thank you for sharing all of the slides with us too. I still ended up doing some screen captures because for my way of learning, I need to have the slide and then my notes next to the slide.
Absolutely. I will mail that to Lisa and Sharon here as soon as I get done.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll go ahead and leave you all now then.
Oh, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. So we have a little time left and we wanted to open it up for other types of questions, technical questions, anything that you might wonder. Those of you who came in late, Jay is not with us. He had to go to a doctor visit, and so he actually left his dog image there so that we could continue to be in the meeting and record it. But the likelihood of his being able to join us before 11:30 is pretty slim. So we are basically opening it up to anybody who has questions about technical issues. One question I've already gotten that I'd like to answer right up front is, if you are using Canvas this fall, I think the best way to get word to your students is for you to contact them directly. But that doesn't mean you have to do it by yourself. Lisa and Jay and I are meeting this afternoon to try to draw up a message and materials that we can point students toward. There's an infographic that Lisa created. We have Passport to Canvas, which is sort of like Growing with Canvas for instructors. Passport for Canvas is for students. Right now, my students in my class are test driving it. Student has the help desk students test driving it. If you would like your students to test drive it, we can certainly, do that. But it may be that everyone's going to be encouraged to take it if they are a student in Canvas. So that is coming. Okay, will there be a link to my Augie on myaugie.edu to Canvas like there is to Moodle? Yes, there will be. But again, the issue that we run into is everybody who can get into either one of the LMSs. But a student coming into Canvas who doesn't have a course in Canvas, the only thing they would be able to see would be Passport to Canvas, and they could self-enroll in that. So at this point, that's how that's set up. But yes, we will have links from the student page to both Canvas and Moodle. We're not quite sure how we will let students know that they don't need one or the other, or they do need one or the other. Hopefully there will be confusion. Hopefully there will be little confusion, but I'm sure there will be some confusion when it comes down to the LMSs.
Sharon, a follow-up, will the email be sent very soon? Because I think that was an answer to my emailed question to you, because I maybe made a mistake of emailing the students now to let them know there's a survey to complete on Canvas, and I just got 3 replies within an hour like, what's Canvas?
Yes,
so
no. The students don't know anything about it yet unless you have contacted them. So
no, I mean, will you or Lisa or someone be emailing students to say like, welcome to Canvas, here's how to log on?
No. I don't think that's going to work because it's too, I would love to be able to tell which instructors are using it. I can't, because the courses aren't published yet. Every student is in every course right now. One thing you do need to know is if you did Canvas, your students in Canvas may not be your most active student list. All right, we did a snapshot upload. So that's another element of what we're looking at, is how do we make sure that we get a live feed into Canvas? And Donovan has to work on that for us. So like I have 2 students who've added since so I had to manually add them to Canvas because they weren't in there. Marcella, you've got a question too on the same sort of thing?
Yeah. My question is, I was building in my first week's worth of activities, quizzes, etc. the other day, and I've got a page built in Canvas that is a welcome to Canvas. Here's how to navigate our class. Here's what you can expect from you. Here's what I'd like to expect from you. And I would like to be able to email my students on Wednesday and say, welcome, we're 1 week out. Please go into this page so that you can learn how to navigate the very basics of our first week. But I got a message saying that my students can't access the class until the 26th.
That's because of the setting in your course.
Oh, so I can change that. I can give them
access. I believe so. Yes, yes.
Okay.
So again, these are the kinds of things that we are the guinea pig group. We are the pilot. We are finding out. So yes, you as your course has a start date. Students cannot get into a course until the start date. And so you would need to make sure that the start date was changed to next Wednesday, this coming Wednesday. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I think part of what we'll do when we meet is try to craft a concise type message that can go in email about the addition of another learning management system so that students know there's a new one and they may very well be using both of them this year until we phase Moodle out. And so we'll have to work with Mark Blackburn on that, but that would be one way that we would try to push that information out to students.
Yeah. And if I was mentioning that if I send it out to all of you, so everybody who's in Growing with Canvas is going to get a message from Lisa and me, basically, that's going to say, if you are using Canvas, copy and paste this information into a message that you send to all of your students. And then I would send that message to them using those lists that Cheryl sent us. So if you have a cross-listed course, you want to go into Civitas 204 and you want to go into History 397, and send that message to both of those class lists. But I also see a number of questions in the chat. I'm going to try to quickly get to, will there be a link? Yes, there will be a link in the myalgae.edu and that sort of thing. Michael has a question, but let me go to these first. How do I get into Canvas? I've used the links from the course to get there, but I'd like a more direct way. If you look at the top, it's augie.instructure.com. That is the actual address. We will put that on the faculty too. We'll put that, so that if you go to the Augie homepage and you go to students or you go to faculty, either one of those, you would have a link to both LMSs, but it's just augie.instructure.com. Will the class list be current by the 26th? It has to be. I will say absolutely yes, but it's not, I need to work with Donovan to get that to happen. We absolutely have to have those class lists be current. Is everyone able to manually add students? I believe so, but you have to know what their student username is. So like AJ Smith 19, that would be a student's username, and then you would add them by that SIS ID. But don't worry about that. We really hope that it will be a live feed very soon. Lee asks, I don't understand. What do I tell my students for asking what is Canvas? How do I get an account, log on, and all that? Should I just tell them to wait a few days? Yes. And if Canvas doesn't have any updates, an updates course list, I've recently had several add and drop. Do I need to be monitoring? I wouldn't worry about that just this minute. Know that we are going to do everything we can to have that be a live feed by the time the class starts. And thank you, Lisa, for putting that. Okay, awesome. So any other questions? That's Mike, you had a question. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So currently, the best way for us to contact students that are enrolled in our courses is to use the format that Cheryl shared with us in the email that she sent recently about class mailing lists.
Yes. Because those are most current, those are up to date. Yes, okay. Those are the best.
And that's a fixed format where we have FA20 followed by whatever the short.
Like Bio 110A. But there is not what you, if you do have multiple sections, you've got to send to both lists. If you have cross sections, like if you have religion and philosophy, you need to make sure you're sending, or if you have religion, philosophy, A, B, you've got 4 lists you need to send to, okay?
Okay. And in
Once your course gets active and live, so either Moodle or Canvas, you'll want to use, you can send your email directly from there.
When you say live, do you mean by a certain, because you said that right now the list that we have of students enrolled in our courses through Canvas is not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, Lisa just posted. Yeah.
Yeah, the last update for the class list was done yesterday.
Okay.
And they're doing it multiple times a week right now, but they haven't gotten it to daily.
Okay.
Updating it daily. But if you look now, it was last updated yesterday.
Excellent.
So it should be pretty close to accurate.
That's excellent. That's great. That's fantastic.
And as far as, so I imagine I'm not alone in that, yes, it sounds like everybody pretty much reaches out to their students prior to this big start day. In my case, I'm planning on doing it this Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I should use the list format, the email address that, the format that is sent by Cheryl and the email that she sent recently, it sounds like, when I do that. And am I understanding correctly that I would be wise perhaps to make an indication in that email that we'll be using Canvas in our class. And if you want to log in, this is where you go, the instructure thing that Lisa just shared with us. My question now then is, can student, if I have set the start date, I set it back to the beginning of this month. So they so access should be available, but will students, can my students that are enrolled in that class use Canvas right now, or do they, are we still waiting for them to have that?
They can. And that's one of the reasons people want to be careful not to publish their courses until they are ready. Because if a student got in there, their account will work, their login will work, and they would see any courses that they are listed in if they are published. If they're not published, they're still hidden. Now, any student going in, Michael, you might want to just wait till this afternoon is when Jay, Lisa, and Cheryl and I are meeting to talk about how do we create this message. So we will have that message ready to send to all of you with a little copy and paste. So you wouldn't have to come up with your own, how do I tell students how to do Canvas? We're going to provide that to you, but then we are not going to provide it directly to the students. You can provide that to the students if you're using Canvas. Because a lot of you are taking Growing with Canvas and decided, nope, I'm not going to do it right now. I'm going to go with Moodle, thank you very much. And so I don't know from who has been a part of it, who is using Canvas and who's not. We won't know until really classes open and start.
Thank you very much.
Michael, you might want to remind them or tell them that they log into that with the same their Augie credentials. So what they use for my Augie or what they've used for Moodle in the past. Just because it looks different, they may think they need a new username and password.
Right. Right. And I'll throw out there again that if anybody has an LTI that they want, we have a lot of them turned on now. Quite a few of those integrations with textbook publishers and with other technology tools have been set up. I'm still working on trying to get the one for Poll Everywhere to work and the one for Zoom to work. We're doing some work on those. But McGraw-Hill, Macmillan, Cengage, Wiley, can't even remember all of them, but they're about a dozen. So if you need one and you don't know, if it's active, you can contact me and I can search for you. And if we don't have it, then we'll work on getting it installed. All right. It's 11:20. Any other questions? I just want to, questions on anything? Okay, I'm not seeing any. I want to very heartily thank you for the time that you spent on this. This has been a huge investment of time on all of your parts. And I speak on behalf of Cheryl and Jay and Lisa, and we are so grateful to all of you for the time that you've invested in this. And I'm hoping that you found it very valuable, and I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing about the courses that you come up with and the significant learning activities that you come up with. So, okay, I'm looking here. I had one message from Sally. How do you know if you've been approved to teach in Canvas? If you've completed Growing with Canvas, you're ready to teach with Canvas. And all of you in this hopefully have done that. I did have a couple questions. That actually reminds me, I did have a couple questions of how do I get credit for completing Growing with Canvas? In our CDF, if you look over at our assignments or you look at the grade book, you'll see that one of the things I'm looking for is a screenshot of your finishing that final quiz, that module 6.2 in Growing with Canvas. It's like the overarching concepts quiz. You take a screenshot of that, or you even just write in what your grade was, and that's the most important piece. Next to that, you'll see that we've got that quiz in here in our CDF, because I practiced importing it and it worked. And I thought this will be one more chance for you to see those questions again, because it rotates the questions. There are about 30 questions, you only get 10. And so if you took it multiple times, you notice that. If you took it once, you only saw 10 questions. But if this way, it gives you a chance just to see a few more of the questions. I'm not really worried about your grade on it. I'm just wanting you to see the questions and kind of test your own skill, see how you're doing. How is the course listed when it's a super course? Good question. If you have a super course, then you will probably see that I've changed the name, or maybe you have if you followed my instructions. You've changed the name to include both of the sections. So Bio 110A, B, instead of A or B. It doesn't say super course. We didn't add that to it, but it does now say the full name. Plus, if you've linked it correctly, you don't even see the other course because you've been moved out of the other course into the meta course, into the super course. So if you do have questions about the super course, let me know, but I think those instructions were pretty clear. Almost everybody got it set up on your own. Very impressed that worked so well. It's a much easier process than it was for Moodle, much easier than it was for Moodle. Oh, and we got some thank yous coming in there. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
And I'll mention when we do the summary this week, we'll include a link to the form that you need to complete for the business office to get your stipend. We do have an SRI that we'll ask you to fill out for the course. We're hoping to maybe offer another section of this during interim for people that couldn't explore Canvas right now, but might be interested in doing it in January. So we would appreciate your feedback so we can incorporate that as we prepare to maybe teach this again in January.
Yep. Right. Okay, well, thank you all so much. And we'll start seeing you on campus and virtually. See everybody at the Kirby welcome time on the 25th. That's exciting. All right. Thank you, everyone.